This podcast is presented by Skies Magazine. If you're interested in the Canadian aviation industry, Skies is your go-to multimedia resource for the latest news, in-depth features, stunning photography, and insightful video coverage. Whether you're an aviation professional or enthusiast, Skies is dedicated to keeping you informed and bringing your passion for aviation to life. Visit skiesmag.com to learn more and subscribe to stay updated on all things Canadian aviation.
Fuel and ignition switches on. RPM switches set. TD switches normal. Doors and hatches closed. Light out. Strobe light on. Restart check is complete. Clear left. Engineers, start number 2. Starting 2. Wing 310 Pilot Project Podcast. Clear takeoff. Runway 31 left.
All right, we're ready for departure here at the Pilot Project Podcast, the best source for stories and advice from RCAF and mission aviation pilots, brought to you by Skies Magazine. I'm your host, Brian Morrison. With me today is my comrade from the Phase 2 Harvard course in Moose Jaw, Major Brian Humza Kilroy, a CF-18 Hornet pilot, as well as current senior national representative for Canada and qualified instructor on the T-346 at the International Flight Training School in Italy. Brian, it's awesome to reconnect with you. Thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Today, we will be talking about Brian's career in the RCAF, as well as the Lead-In Fighter Training Program, or LIFT, in Italy. But before we jump into any of that, let's go through Brian's bio. Born in Grand Prairie, Alberta, Major Brian Kilroy spent his childhood in Stony Plain, Alberta, before continuing on to post-secondary education at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, or NAIT, and the University of Alberta, and joining the CAF in 2006. The son of an RCMP officer, he had his first aviation experiences on RCMP transports and military service Air Hercules aircraft, which sparked his interest in a career in aviation. His mother also encouraged this interest, as she too was a huge aviation fan, bringing him to air shows throughout his childhood, where he even had the chance to see the CF-18 demo. It was these early aviation experiences that inspired him to follow his dream of becoming a fighter pilot. Brian later joined the Royal Canadian Air Cadets in Stony Plain before deciding to pursue his dream of flying through the RCAF's regular officer training plan, graduating from the University of Alberta with a degree in chemical engineering. Brian began his flight training in 2008 at 3 Canadian Forces Flight Training School in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba. At the end of Phase 2 flight training at 2 Canadian Forces Flying Training School in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, he was selected to fly jets and was given the opportunity to attend the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training Program, or NJEP, in Wichita Falls, Texas, where he would go on to fulfill his lifelong dream of receiving his RCAF pilot's wings. In 2013, following his CF-18 Hornet course at 410 Tactical Fighter Operational Training Squadron in Cold Lake, Alberta, Brian was posted to 409 Tactical Fighter Squadron at Four Wing Cold Lake as an operational fighter pilot. In 2015, he helped reform 401 Tactical Fighter Squadron when it was reactivated as the second operational CF-18 Hornet Squadron at Four Wing. Brian was a 4-ship lead and qualified electronic warfare instructor, and in 2017, he was posted to 410 Tactical Fighter Operational Training Squadron, where, using his combat and operational experience, he began training the next generation of CF-18 pilots. In 2019, Brian was selected as the CF-18 demonstration pilot. He conducted the CF-18 demonstration at numerous airshows across Canada and the US. He also flew multiple heritage flybys with the CF-18 in historical warbirds. Brian has actively trained throughout Canada and the United States with the Hornet and has served on NORAD missions across Canada. He has also deployed on international operations, including NATO's Op Reassurance, and has served on 2 separate Op Impact tours as part of the CAF's support to the global coalition to degrade and ultimately defeat Daesh in Iraq and Syria. In 2018, he had the honor of leading Canada's last CF-18 Hornet combat mission on Op Impact. He is currently posted to Decimo Manu Air Base in Italy at the International Flight Training School. Major Kilroy is the senior national representative for Canada, as well as a qualified instructor on the T-346. So let's talk about your early days. Brian, your bio mentioned you got your start in aviation through your parents. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. It was just from childhood early on. There always seemed to be some interest in, aviation in the family. There was other members, my grandpa had flown previously. There was also just in general anything that was loud and fast. Like I remember growing up, we'd go to the sprint car races just outside Edmonton. Those were always exciting. And, as you mentioned in the bio, going to the air show. So it was always something that I enjoyed seeing, these displays of jets, whether it was the Snowbirds or the CF-18, anything like that interested me. So it really kind of just was in the back of my mind the entire time growing up, but it wasn't something I was, thinking I'm going to be a fighter pilot when I grow up. It was always something that I thought about doing, but hadn't really given it as you do when you're just a young kid, not really thinking ahead. You just, that's cool. That'd be fun to do. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started to seriously think about it. And even at graduating high school, I still wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. That's why I went to NATE. There was, some good job opportunities, but I thought, no, this is the time. If I actually want to pursue this, I gotta focus now, go to university, get my degree, and then I can give it a shot. And I could always go back to my degrees later on if I didn't want to do it or didn't like it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was it that inspired you to pursue this interest in aviation by serving in the CAF? Like you mentioned that it was kind of like an idea, but eventually you got serious about it. What made you start getting serious about it?
It was general aviation. I always find interesting, but it doesn't really give me the same thrill that, jets do. So
yeah,
I never really thought about going as like a general aviation route and just going to the airlines. Even though, I had flown a few different small aircraft growing up. My uncle had a little ultralight I got a flight in, and I always found them fun, but it wasn't something I was, desperate to go do. I wanted to go in something that, was fast, pulled G's, and did some sort of mission. And even if it didn't end up being fighter jets in the military, at least the mission set for the other fleets were more something that interested me. So it wasn't just the aviation in general. It was also the sort of whole type of flying that was being done by the CAF.
Yeah, like that mission focused flying.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Let's talk about your early flight training. Well, you mentioned you had a little bit of previous flying experience before joining the RCAF, like just flying in your uncle's ultralight.
Just a few times with him, and through the cadets, I got a chance to go up in the gliders a few times. I was never got my glider license or pilot license through them, but I got a chance to go up in gliders, and I can't even remember what it was, a Cessna and helicopter ride, a few different things along the way. So I didn't have any, base for flying experience, but I had a few exposure flights.
Okay, so you were kind of that classic, you were what the program was built for, basically, someone showing up with very little to no experience and just building a pilot from there.
Yeah, exactly. I just assumed I knew it all, but going in cold pretty much.
Oh, man. So you attended phase 1 flight training on the Globe during the summer of 2008. What did it feel like to arrive at your first flight training course in the RCAF?
That seemed like it was finally starting to happen. It was, excitement, a little bit of hesitance, like what have I got myself into? Because it's even previously in the military, going to boot camp and stuff, it didn't really seem like I was on that path yet. But this was the first time showing up. There's planes on the line. People are walking around in flight suits. It's like, okay, I'm here. We're starting this journey. So it was both exciting, but also a bit overwhelming because I'm sure, as you remember, even just something, they give you the checklist, sit you down, like, okay, you have to memorize all these startup checks. And you look at the pages and think, oh, this is going to be a daunting task. And that was just for something basic like the Globe that doesn't have the startup checks that the Hornet has. So it was really, you don't know what you don't know. And then you're just getting into it and realize there's a whole world out there that I've never experienced.
Yeah, for sure. I remember, so I skipped phase 1, but I remember somebody sent me the checklist like a month ahead of time before phase 2. And I was reading through the Harvard checklist and like, what does this stuff even mean? Like, I didn't understand any of it. And then I found out that most of it was supposed to be memorized. And I was just like, how am I ever going to do this?
I still feel like I wasn't prepared, although I was prepared as you can be as a student going for your first flight, but still remember feeling like I wasn't prepared at all. I wasn't going to remember the checks, but then once you start going into it, it's those hours of practice you did in your room beforehand, and it just kind of happens. Make mistakes, obviously, but it's surprising. You almost surprise yourself what you're able to start to go through, because it's not a small trickle of information there. It's definitely start feeding it to you pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your first impression of flight training in the RCAF?
It was definitely. I mean, I thought the Globe was basically a jet at that point, because compared to the aircraft I was in before, and it was a whole community that I'd never really seen outside of like sports teams and stuff, where you'd get together and you'd work hard and then have enjoy your Friday night together, and then back at it studying together on the weekend, prepping for missions Monday morning. And it was just something I hadn't seen at any of the sort of university and civilian side jobs I'd worked. And I'd gone to a civilian university, so I didn't see the same thing that some of the guys would have seen at RMC, for example.
Yeah, for sure. I felt a bit of the same having graduated from a civilian university. There's a bit of a culture shock arriving at flight training and immersing yourself in that world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So once you graduated university, it was time to attend Phase 2 flight training at 2CF-FDS, affectionately known as the Big Two in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Now, you already knew you wanted to be a fighter pilot by this point. Did you go into this course feeling a sense of competition for those slots?
I wouldn't say competition, because I didn't know, how many slots there were going to be, how many people wanted jets. So I wasn't feeling like I was competing against other people, but it definitely felt like there was, self-induced pressure to perform, because there's a minimum grade that you have to get. So every time it was a check ride, I always felt like there was some pressure to get that minimum grade.
Yeah.
Otherwise, between other squadron members, I wouldn't say it felt like we're competing for the same slots. I know some people have felt that way in the past, but it never seemed like that to me. It would just more, it was trying to make it through the best I could, just because I knew that if I didn't perform, then that door would be shut right away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you talk about slots. I remember, and not knowing how many people wanted it, I do recall, or seem to recall, them asking like, who wants this, who wants that? And everyone's putting up their hands for various things. And at first there was like a good chunk of the course that had their hands up for jets. And as the course went on, like less and less people still had their hands up for jets. Like they were finding out what a challenge it was.
Yeah, it's definitely a different lifestyle than some of the other flying inside and outside of the CAF.
Yeah, for sure. How did you find flying the Harvard 2?
Well, then when I went from the Grove to the Harvard 2, now that felt like a jet. And
Yeah.
it was a whole step up. You're sitting now tandem as opposed to side. And it seemed like just the fastest airplane that was out there at the time. You're just trying to get your brain to process everything at that speed, because by the time I got to Phase 2, the 30 hours I did on Phase 1 were already pushed out of my brain, because I still had one more university and some OJT I had done prior to that. So I didn't remember any of the flying skills. So it felt like kind of starting from fresh again, remembering a few things, but it definitely felt like a big jump that we were just going from, previously a piston engine aircraft, now up to a turboprop, with all the extra intricacies and complexity involved with that. And the maneuvering got a lot more aggressive and interesting, in my opinion, compared to previously. Because, after you learn all the basics, I remember we had a bad weather day and we did an actual missed approach, IF diversion, and my brain was just exploding, even though the instructor was just talking me through the whole time, because you don't have that many hours flying instruments at that point, and it just seemed like it was almost an overwhelming task. But then with time it started to get a little bit more comfortable, and then add in some of the interesting flying, like formation flying, a little bit more aggressive maneuvering. So it felt like we're always making progress, but it's still, you're chipping away at a giant iceberg. It was hard to see the end at that point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing too, talking about performance, is we started flying like in the depth of winter. So with that cold air, those things that were like climbing like rocket ships, like it was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember some of those first takeoffs, and you immediately forgot everything you'd tried memorizing.
Yeah, and all like the altitude restrictions before the end of the runway and all those various rules. And it was so much to try to remember. It was crazy.
and for any of the listeners out there that had gone through that training as well, they'll remember having to figure out all the visual points, Old Wives Lake, coming back to the pattern and everything like that. That was quite a different change compared to the little bit of flying I had done beforehand.
Yeah. Now, we were on the same course as we've mentioned in Moose Jaw. I think we did a really good job of balancing fun and hard work. What was your philosophy on that back then, and has it changed?
Yeah, philosophy definitely changed, because fun for me now is different than back then. I've got a family, so the fun for me now is when the kids go to bed and I can just sit in some peace and quiet and watch a bit of TV. But back then, it's nice just to go out to the mess with everyone, enjoy some drinks on Friday night, and then decompress from the entire week. Talk about all the new things, complain about all the things we didn't like. I think is a pretty much an international hobby for pilots. And then just having Saturday free, and then back to it, back in the books on Sunday.
Yeah, and that was the same for me. And that's kind of, I think, the recommended pattern for most people at Moose Jaw is basically take Friday night off, relax on Saturday, get back to it on Sunday, and then go hard all week.
Yeah, and being with a bit of an international community there too. I remember a few trips. We did one ski trip out to the mountains with one of the Hungarian students, or a couple of the Hungarian students. So a chance for them to experience some of the things that we've experienced was also a lot of fun, to bring that sort of international flavor, which has been true, I guess, through all my kind of training, is that international training piece.
Yeah, and I remember really enjoying that between the Hungarians and the Italians in our flight. It was really cool interacting with those people from different cultures.
Yeah, it definitely was, and I'm getting to live that again here.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about the self-induced pressure based on your desires to be a fighter pilot. How did you deal with that?
I guess there wasn't probably the best way. I mean, sometimes you would just let the pressure kind of build up, and then you would get frustrated and just have to kind of temper your emotions sometimes. But a lot of times the best strategy I found was just talking to the other guys, especially on Friday night. And that's half of what it is, really, that sort of team cohesion is. You can just go to them and be like, I don't know what happened on that flight. I was completely tumbleweed the entire time. I couldn't find, the route. I was off my altitude. You can go and they can sympathize with you, and vice versa. So it was one way of outletting it compared to just, completely internalizing it. But sometimes, it's hard to not let it build and get frustrated. And then, that leads into nerves for your next flight. So if you keep letting it stack, then it just builds and makes your performance worse. So, the Friday night get together and just talking about your week was a good way of doing it.
Yeah, for sure. So you were selected to go Jets and conducted further training in Moose Jaw for the Phase 3 Harvard course. Can you tell us briefly about Phase 3 on the Harvard?
Yeah, so back when I went through, it wasn't named Phase 3 Harvard. That's what they're calling it now. And they changed that not too long after I went through. So at the time, there was two streams that you would either go off to the Hawk or down to the T-38 on NJEP. So after Phase 2, what I did was called Phase 2 Bravo, which was kind of the same, the same aircraft, the Harvard, but then you would go a little bit more advanced on the maneuvering flying type, just to bridge that gap between Phase 2 and what at the time was Phase 3 on the Hawk, or as I went Phase 3 in NJEP. So it gave a little bit more of a knowledge base and a little bit more experience before we went down. And then on top of that, knowing there was a few different areas that the Phase 2 down in the US had that we didn't have, they added in like an extra low-level sortie, and I think there was an extra, formation flight, just a few things to, again, even top off that skill base, which then morphed eventually into the Phase 3 Harvard. So at the time, it wasn't a wings course for myself and the few others that had gone down there. So we went down and did the phase 3 on the T-38, and that was our wings course.
Right. And as you said, we were still using the Hawk or the CT-155 Hawk for our early jet training. You did go down to the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training Program, or NJEP, in Wichita Falls. Why were we sending Canadians on this course at the time, and why do we continue to do so today?
So the NJET program, it's actually a really good program to be a part of, and Canada has for a long time been a part of this. We're one of, it's a NATO program. So there's countries, maybe you don't want to say most. There's multiple NATO countries down there, quite a few from different communities that would different countries that would send students, but not all sent students at all times. But we've always had a footprint there. So we've always had at least an SNR down in Wichita Falls. And at various times before I went through, they had sent some students for phase 2 there. So they would send, 2 students at a time, maybe every once in a while. Just it both was a good to keep our foot in the door there for how training is being done at other places, because you don't want to isolate too much. Mm-hmm. Then you can lose a bit of the bigger perspective, and there's usually good ideas that can be taken from how other countries operate, and interoperability, that you're still teaching essentially the same thing. So it's always been good from that perspective. And then the other thing is it allows a bit of a overflow capacity. So if you have something as large as NJEP, which has multiple NATO countries, it's just a bigger footprint than we had in Canada. So they could fit in a couple of Canadians here and there, which would allow overflow if we start to get backed up in Moose Jaw for any reason. So that was part of it. And then, so they had a few guys they were looking to take down there. There was a few ahead of me, a few guys or girls. There was some on the course ahead of me, and then there was going to be a couple on the course that I was taken down with. And at that time, they were also looking at some of the size restrictions of the Hawk, because I'm 6'2", so the Hawk is quite a cramped cockpit. So they just said, okay, of the guys going jets on your course, you can go down there. Then we don't have to worry about potential height issues in the cockpit, which may or may not have been a problem, but it was just the easy solution to send me down.
Okay. And you mentioned there SNR, is that Senior National Representative?
Yeah, exactly. There's it's my counterpart right now down in NJEP, and there's always been a Senior National Representative there. Whether or not we have students, we've typically filled that role.
Okay. At the time, I heard this course was exceptionally tough. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience completing it?
Yeah, it was definitely walking into quite a strict regime, especially the phase 3 there. So they do phase 2, 3, and phase 4, or they call it IFF, Introductory to Fighter Fundamentals. But for the phase 3 there, you walk in, you're in a flight there was a couple other Canadians, and then there was Germans, Spanish, and Americans also in my flight down there. And from basically get-go, you're there 12 hours a day, every day. For the first part of the course, you show up at the report time. Everyone stands up, and the emergencies in the jet down there referred to as boldface. So one at a time, each morning you stand up, you recite your emergency, and get it right or get it wrong. If you get it wrong, there'd be follow-on questions, but they move down the line every morning. Everyone has to recite one of the emergencies, and then you can start your day. At that point, you're going on the schedule for whatever events you have, sims, flights, ground school, whatever it is, and then you have to be there for the dismissal at the end of the day. So 12-hour day every day, pretty much for the first, I can't remember how long, but I think it was the first third of the course or so was like that. And then you get a little bit more freedom to come and go later on. They didn't have the strict dismissal time, but it was still definitely long days. And then you would go back and do some studying in your room afterwards. And it always was, again, that self-induced pressure, but it's a very, fast upgrade as well. It's a wings course on a jet, so they have some high expectations. And kind coming out of there, it wasn't a guaranteed fighter slot either. You still had to perform and meet expectations. So it definitely was a challenge. And the jet was also quite a step up from the Harvard, because
Mhm.
I mean, T-38, it's an old aircraft. It had been upgraded. We were flying the Charlie version when I was down there, so you had some more avionics. But the aircraft itself, if you take a look at that, or its counterpart, the F5, like very small wings, very fast, a lot of thrust from compared to what I'd previously been flying. So always felt like you're behind the jet, just trying to keep up with what's going on next, what's happening, because it wasn't something that you can really prepare yourself for, going from a turboprop up to a jet, anymore than just having to get in there and try and do it.
Yeah. It sounds pretty intimidating, to be honest.
Yeah, in a new country with a bunch of foreign instructors. So it was intimidating, but
Yeah.
again, that's where getting together as a flight. You'd every morning start the popcorn machine. That was mandatory, pretty much unofficial mandatory. So you'd get together, figure out your day, help each other prepare for the flights, and try and learn all the procedures. And again, it's similar procedures to Canada for just even basic aviation, but you still have to make that the minor differences, start to learn everything, as well as all the extra information you're taking on board. And a new airbase where a lot of the other squadron members that had flown on phase 2 there, they were already familiar with flying out of Wichita Falls. So it was a whole new base, new aircraft, new everything for us.
Did you find there was like pressure to keep a good reputation for Canada while you were training?
Yeah. I don't know if it was like ever spoken, but I think that's kind of in everyone's mind. You don't want to look like, you're lazy or not performing, because you are, you're not the host nation country there, but you want to look good in front of them. But everyone's kind of got that mentality. But I think you try and want to make a good impression as a foreigner there.
Yeah. So next was your CF-18 Hornet course at 410 Tactical Fighter Operational Training Squadron in Cold Lake, Alberta. How did you find this course? And did you feel that NJEP had helped prepare you well to fly fighters?
So just even jumping back, I guess, a little bit, I'll mention before the 410 Squadron, after phase 3 at NJEP was IFF, which was a little bit of introduction into BFM, ACM, basic fighter maneuvers, advanced combat maneuvers. So like your 1v1, your 2v1 dogfighting type thing, which is starting to build the basics. That's what they call IFF, and a little bit of air-to-ground weapons deliveries simulated. So that gave us, a few months more after we got our wings of experience going to 410. So going into 410, it definitely felt, again, intimidating. Each time, it's just a bigger jet, a faster jet, more to learn, more ground checks for startup, more emergencies. So even though we got that extra sort of bridge in between the two, which is the standard step for anyone going to the fighters, it still felt like a massive jump, because the Hornet is just so much more capable in every respect. But it's not just the speed now that we're talking about in an increase; it's all the other systems. So the time to start up a T-38 is significantly less than a Hornet, because it's more than just 2 engines and a few screens that need to go on. Now it has to turn on all the other systems that the Hornet has. Start to, in the beginning, you don't have to do all the programming. You don't have to check this targeting pod. You don't have to set up any weapons, but they keep adding that. So it's not like your ground checks. You just learn them once. At each phase, you have to learn more and more as you go along. And now you're starting to add in the weapons of the aircraft. You have to start to learn the air-to-air missiles, the air-to-ground bombs, the gun, and how all that factors in. So it felt like you're on an uphill battle the entire course. It's interesting, but I don't remember really having a chance at any point in the training just to sit back and enjoy it. It wasn't until probably years later that I actually had the capacity that I could start to just enjoy some of the flights for what they are, and not have to be completely focused on trying to get the next thing, the next step on the mission or the overall training in general.
Yeah, whatever the next checklist is or the next thing you need to be doing, the next task.
And that's not to say I didn't enjoy it, but I mean, when you're trying to max perform, do your best, it's like saying, did you enjoy that hockey game? Well, you weren't out there enjoying it if you're trying to win and you're going your hardest. You enjoy the overall experience, but you're not just having a nice, gentle skate out there.
Yeah,
so
you're not out there like,
yeah.
I don't know how to put this. I know exactly what you're saying. Like, yes, you're enjoying it, but that's not the focus. The focus is the mission.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're too focused to enjoy it.
Yeah, almost until it's over and you can look back.
Yeah, exactly. I don't remember half the things I did on 410. Just went by, just in a bit of a haze there as you're trying to take everything on board.
Yeah. So after 410, you arrived at 409 Tactical Fighter Squadron, again in Cold Lake in 2013. What was the learning curve like there, having just come off the Hornet course?
So finishing 410 was a bit of a relief, because that was the first time in the career that I was like, okay, I am now actually going to a squadron where I'm going to just be a member of it. I'm not on an upgrade. Well, that's not true. You're always on an upgrade, but I'm not on the student upgrade trying to become a fighter pilot. I can now consider myself a fighter pilot, not fully qualified one at this point, but at least I can walk in here with a little bit of comfort that I've, quote unquote, made it.
Yeah.
So that was a really good feeling, just walking into a new squadron, but also intimidating, because now you're with the grown-ups. There's no one hand holding you anymore. You are one of the grown-ups. So it definitely was also just trying to get your feet under you, figure it out, and right away you're onto the combat ready upgrade fairly shortly thereafter, which is your upgrade as a wingman. So you don't need to be a lead or know everything at that point, but you're really trying to focus just as the number 2 or number 4 in the formation for whatever you happen to be doing. So that upgrade kind of mirrored what we went through at 410, but again, it's not trying to handhold at this point, but they're just trying to reinforce everything and get you to the point where you could deploy in an operation if needed. So the expectations, although not the same as in 410, where it's always pass or fail flights, and if you get too many fails, then you're immediately cut from the course. But the expectations are like, you've graduated, you're on the squadron, you have to perform as a squadron member, because we could find ourselves very, very shortly after there, in some sort of operation or combat role, and we expect you to be able to perform at that level, and we're just reinforcing and ensuring we've met that kind of minimum level before we go off anywhere. So it's still very challenging on squadron, but it's not an instructor-student relationship. It's more of a cohesive team with the senior members and the junior members. Your instructor students aren't separated in the building. You're all in the same office. You're doing everything together, and then one day you might be supporting someone else's upgrade. The next, it might be one of your upgrade missions. So it was definitely a little bit, even though it was still a stressful upgrade, it was a little bit, I don't want to say relaxing, but that self-induced pressure was starting to slowly lower as we went through this.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that sounds similar to most fleets that I've heard of. Like, once you finally qualify, you get through the OTU, the operational training unit, you're actually qualified on the aircraft, and like there's still so much to learn, but you are somewhat of a peer now, and like, yes, you're still in a mentorship, like you're the what is it, the mentee, but you're a peer as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that sort of mentor as opposed to an instructor kind of relationship with whoever is teaching you for that day. It's definitely kind of the feel you get on Squadron.
KF Aerospace, Canada's largest MRO and founding partner in SkyAlign for the Future Aircrew Training Program, is proud to be the exclusive North American dealer for the Grobe 120 TP. The Grobe 120TP is a world-class training aircraft, combining turbine power, advanced avionics, side-by-side seating, and full aerobatic capability. Already trusted by the German Air Force, Canada's future aircrew training program, and militaries worldwide, it's built to deliver performance and reliability. With its versatility, the Grobe 120TP is the ideal platform for both military training and civilian programs, including upset recovery training. Go to kfaero.ca, that's kfaero.ca, to learn more and get in touch with us.
What is the upgrade process on the F-18?
That took probably, I want to say almost a year, but it's not a continuous, every sortie isn't an upgrade.
Okay.
But it goes through so once I got to 410 and then same at 409, and then actually similar here, they all follow a similar sort of syllabus. So at 410 and here in Italy, obviously you have to convert to the aircraft. But after you get those basics out of the way, it's usually starting with your BFM, which is your 1v1 maneuvering. So your instructor in that case is in the other aircraft, and at 410 you'd have someone in your backseat, but now at 409 on your combat ready upgrade, it's just the instructor is the lead aircraft and he's in the other jet, and you set up for that 1v1 fight, whether it always usually goes offensive, so you start from a position of advantage somewhat behind the other aircraft, defensive where they start in a position behind you, and then high aspect where you're merging neutral. So it's usually a few of those trips each, and then you move on to ACM, which is your 2v1 maneuvering. You have your flight lead / your instructor is in the other aircraft, but the same formation as you, and then the red aircraft, the adversary, is the third aircraft there, and you're trying to get sort of a 2 versus 1 scenario, which in theory should make it a lot easier because you're outnumbering them, but it also brings in another layer of safety, whereas when it's 1v1, you just have to avoid the other aircraft you're fighting. Now in a 2v1, you have to keep track of both aircraft and do it safely and effectively, so it can create, the lead aircraft and the red aircraft are doing the BFM, the 1v1 maneuvering, and now you're trying to stay above or below the fight to try and shoot into there and kill the red air without affecting the fight by, if you put yourself in the way of lead that he has to maneuver away, now you've essentially disrupted how his flow is, or it could even develop into a safety issue. So it's just a layer of complexity that you have to add onto there. And then from there, it usually goes into some sort of beyond visual range type engagements. So it's kind of the inside out mentality. So now you start employing, previously in the 1v1, 1v2, you're employing your heat-seeking missiles. Now in the beyond visual range, now you're using the airplane's radar to find aircraft with the help of ground-based controllers. And with that, then you can try and employ your radar-guided missiles to them. So it's that bigger picture, which now you're talking about maybe 2 versus 2, or up to a 4-ship versus X number of red air. Your bigger scenarios, and then those can ultimately lead into merges where it brings back the fundamentals of BFM and ACM. And then after that, then you start bringing into it all the air-to-ground components. So you switch phases, you go into an air-to-ground mentality, and now you think about all the weapons that you're trying to employ, whether it's the Mark 82, which are just unguided bombs, or you bring into GPS bombs, laser-guided bombs, the 20 millimeter gun on the Hornet. And so you learn the basics of those at the range, doing just basic patterns, dropping weapons, and then you start to build a scenario from there, looking at close air support. So troops on the ground that could potentially be in some sort of conflict, you're providing support to them, near the front line, air-to-ground deliveries, but without contested air picture. So you don't have to worry about any sort of threat from the air, but you're thinking about the guys on the ground, employing weapons in support of them. And then you build out from there, sort of beyond the forward line of troops, now thinking about air interdiction, which is employing weapons into contested airspace behind enemy lines. So now that brings into the whole beyond visual range air-to-air employment with now all the weapons employment air-to-ground, that sort of strike fighter capability that the Hornet excels at. So you have to kind of meld all of those together into one, final phase where you're going to see you have to shoot some red air down on the way in that are trying to protect the hostile airspace / ground forces. Then you have to go in, employ your weapons, and now potentially there could be some sort of threat on the way out that you have to fight your way out of the contested airspace. So it really brings in all the pieces by the end of any of those upgrades, which is really the culmination of each of the courses / upgrades that you're going through.
Wow, that sounds like incredibly intense by the end. Super, super complex.
Yeah, it leaves a lot of room for error. So you really have to, we get before any mission, it's quite a long process. You're gonna mission plan for it, as any fleet does, brief it, and then you're gonna just debrief everything that you can to pull all those lessons learned on the mission and go through. So we would sit down, watch like the top-down overview of the entire fight, watch all the lines, see if everyone was performing their air-to-air, air-to-ground correctly. Then you move on to the actual review of your tapes, so you could see if you're from the HUD and your screens, if everything was done properly, how you're either shooting air-to-air or in the air-to-ground employment, because some of it, your target, you might not even have exact coordinates on. So you have to use the targeting pod to look around, try and find your target while operating in this contested environment. So how is your air-to-ground targeting? Did that match up with what you mission planned? And then when there was any sort of pop-up threats, how did you react? So the even just one flight was pretty much an entire day's effort. And then it was immediately into planning for the next day. So it definitely, anytime you're on an upgrade flight or part of an upgrade flight, there was some fairly long working hours just to have the whole scenario come together.
Wow, there is a lot to these flights.
Yeah, and that's, I think, why it's not for everyone.
Yeah, I'm not sure that would be for me, to be honest. Like it's like the flying itself sounds amazing, but holy cow, what a ton of work to put into a single flight. That's crazy. Yeah,
and it was I was young, didn't have kids at the time, so I could devote a lot of time on the squadron.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, as experience grows, though, your capacity, your bucket is opening up. So as long as you're keeping up with that sort of learning curve throughout, you're never really overtasked. You're just always kind of on the edge until you get quite a bit more senior.
Yeah. So this is pretty interesting. In 2015, you helped reform 401 Tactical Fighter Squadron when it was reactivated as the second operational CF-18 Hornet Squadron at Four Wing Cold Lake. What was the reason for this reactivation, and what did the task of reforming an operational squadron consist of?
So I was moderately junior at the time. So strategically, I'm not sure the decision, but from the sort of tactical squadron level, what I could see and felt is when I first went to 409, it was, the only tactical squadron in Cold Lake, and it was a big squadron, and it didn't feel like we were really just one squadron because of the size and being the only one, and then the counterpart in Bagotville being the only other squadron. You couldn't just do something as a squadron, because one of the main roles of the Hornet is QRA, like the NORAD Defense of Canada. So that was never a mission that you could just put on pause. That's always happening. So you'd always have people manning the QRA with jets ready to go if there's ever a need for them. So you always have a little chunk of the squadron doing that, and that shift work. So those guys.
Can you just explain what QRA is?
Quick reaction alert. So that's your jets guys ready to go. Think of best example would be a firefighter. You see the bell goes, and they all We didn't have a pole, unfortunately, to slide down, but that equivalent where you have to scramble to get your gear on. You get launched in some direction, you don't know which way you're going, to intercept an aircraft or respond to, maybe a Russian incursion of a bear bomber in the north, or whatever the mission may be. So that was always, you'd have crews ready to go for that. Crews always manning the QRA facility, and that kind of took a little chunk of the squadron away. And you wouldn't see them even on their off days, because you'd either be there for a full shift or back home resting on call, essentially, to go back in. So there'd be a chunk taken away from that. And then, we're still doing those upgrades on Squadron, the first one being the combat ready upgrade. So there'd be guys at the squadron doing that. And then you'd have someone, say, on an exercise down in the States, or, off somewhere else, that you're now just pulling chunks of the squadron away. So it never felt like we were all there at the same time, usually. So one big thing I noticed is, once we actually split into two squadrons, it made a big difference in sort of keeping the whole squadron together, because now one squadron would be in charge of, the QRA for a period of time, and the other squadron would have a little bit more flexibility. If there was an exercise coming up, you could go as a squadron, or
Right.
when you're at home in the QRA, that's when you just be at your home base, doing upgrades, everything like that. And it seemed a lot more of you deploy as a squadron, as opposed to just grabbing a handful from the squadron and taking them different places, taking jets different places. So it definitely was good from a just a cohesiveness perspective, that we had that smaller, more tight-knit group that we always went and did everything as a squadron.
Right on. It sounds like it kind of allowed for like a greater level of cohesiveness as a unit.
Yeah. And it was also a really fun experience, reforming a squadron, moving over there. I mean, a lot of the admin work was outside of my purview, but it was definitely interesting seeing, the planes getting painted up with the new squadron colors, setting up in one of the other hangars, trying to make the hangar our own. One of the other squadron members spent a bunch of time painting a depiction on the squadron lounge with all the World War II jets from different points in time, making that our new home. And just seemed like a sort of a really exciting time to be a part of the squadron. Something I don't think a lot of people get to really see in their career is, reforming a squadron.
Yeah. Can you tell us about some of the favorite exercises you attended with the Hornet?
Yeah. I mean, we got to do a bunch of different ones. There was always, there's something unique about each one. One, I forget actually the location, but early on, as a wingman, we were on an exercise, and it was the first time I ever got to go and do dissimilar BFM. So fighting against something that wasn't a Hornet, and in this case, it was an F-15. So, got airborne, split up our formation, they split up their formation, and then we would go to a fight zone and do 1v1 maneuvering. And that first time, I mean, I was just barely, combat ready, but still trying to learn a lot about the aircraft. And now all of a sudden there's a giant F-15 in my face that I'm trying to fight. And he's a super experienced guy that's, not holding back. I remember just getting absolutely clobbered by him and just thinking, what happened? And it goes so fast. But I mean, it's great because an F-15 is a huge aircraft, even compared to the Hornet. So just seeing the size of it, the different maneuverability, because the Hornet handles completely different. So it has, an F-15 has a ton of thrust, whereas the Hornet has more alpha, more angles it can pull. So just seeing how the two aircraft fight each other, and that's, a big learning point in your career when you start to see something else.
Do you meet up with the other pilot after the dogfight? Like, do you get a chance to be like, wow, that was crazy?
You brief it together because it's all scripted, how the split up and our return to base is going to be, and what kind of fights you're going to do. And I mean, the the fighter language about maneuvering. Like if someone says we're going to do some high aspect BFM, that's fairly universal. But you have to set some just base level safety things that may not be universal. Like what's the starting altitude going to be for this fight? How are we going to deconflict? Because you don't want to just point at each other and hope for the best.
Right.
So is there going to be altitude separation, or are we going to separate laterally at merges? Do we have the exact same rules? Is it no closer than 1,000 feet, 500 feet? What's the limits for today? Things like that. So there is a whole, it's a more extensive brief than you would even just for 2 Hornets going up doing a BFM type fight. So there's a lot, and you're working with these guys when you're on an exercise here and there, because as different formations, but within the bigger aspect of the whole exercise. But now it's nice to actually get one-on-one with some of them, talk about the mission, and then of course after you can debrief everything together. Just so that's where the learning points come from. You get a senior F-15 guy telling a junior F-18 guy, what he did wrong, how a Hornet should fight an F-15, where he has the advantage, what opportunities I could have taken to maybe gain the advantage on him. So you definitely go through the whole brief and debrief process on anything like that. And then other exercises like Maple Flag, that was exciting, being part of that, being a large force exercise, which that's where you have multiple countries bringing different assets, and not just fighters, because you try and now integrate like a wartime type scenario, and you're having large amounts of adversaries on the red side, and you go up, and now it's not just about the 1v1 maneuvering, it's the whole planning of how we're going to get call it 20, 30 jets airborne, who's going to be where, how long, because you don't have a ton of time to stay airborne with a jet, but do you have air-to-air refueling assets? Do you who's going to replace who at each point along this fight? Because you don't want to just everyone turn around to go get gas or leave mid-fight and just leave it wide open. So you have to have a staggered replacement strategy, thinking about, okay, we're going to have some guys protecting air-to-air, only protecting the strike force. The strike force is going to go in, try and get air-to-ground weapons away. But what are all the contingencies if if the air-to-air offensive counter-air is what they call it, if that becomes tied up in an engagement, are the strike force, are they going to turn around and try and gain some ground back, or are they going to become part of the air-to-air fight after they release their weapons? Are they now air-to-air players, or are they just going to fly out, clear the airspace for the next in the chain? And then is there a high value asset you need to protect, like AWACS, or do we have a C-130 doing a troop insertion, or like a medevac that has to have Overwatch type protection throughout this entire engagement? So it's that you're starting to look more. Previously, I was talking about the combat ready upgrade for the wingman. Then you have your lead upgrades. Now these type of exercises, you have your mission commander type upgrades, trying to look at the big picture. So that was really interesting to be a part of that early on in my career. And then later on, I got to participate in something similar up in, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Red Flag. This takes place Red Flag, Alaska. It's the Alaskan version of the Red Flag that takes place down in Nellis. But that was also interesting because they have different facilities. You're now integrating with a whole bunch of other American assets, other international assets. It was the first time I saw F-22s part of our package. We were strikers, they were air-to-air, and you see F-15s, F-16s. There was Mirage 2000s, a bit of everything taking place there. So it's definitely, you're seeing the bigger picture that of that iceberg that you initially were just at the base of, or that mountain you were just at the base of. Now you're starting to see how everything plays together, and how all the roles kind of work together.
Wow. You took part in NATO's Op Reassurance. Can you tell us what your mission there was and what the tour was like for you?
That was a very interesting one. So we were in Romania with the Romanian Air Force, who at the time just had MiG-21s. So there was an air policing role to it, which is the NATO component. At the time, we were based at Camp Terzi, and there wasn't a lot of actual air policing sorties going on, but the for us at that moment. But um, it was super interesting because MiG-21 being a Soviet-made aircraft, it's one of the ones we often brief to and train to in these scenarios. So it's like, if you're doing a BFM mission or a defensive counter or whatever your mission set, you might be like, okay, we have flankers and MiG-21s or whatever other aircraft. And so for the first time seeing one of those and now get to actually do some of this exercises with the Romanian Air Force was very interesting for me. We did 1v1 type maneuvering, which that's exactly the kind of training you want to have as a junior fighter pilot, where you get to actually see what an actual Russian aircraft is going to maneuver like, and not just have it all played by another Hornet or an Alpha Jet saying we'll pretend it's this today. Actually get to see how it flies. So we did kind of the same sort of mission sets training wise on Op Reassurance that we would do back home, but now it's with the Romanian Air Force, which just brought a whole nother dynamic to it. And being in Romania, I'd never been there before, so it was super interesting. Just some of the extracurricular stuff we got to do, like one weekend, randomly Billy Idol was at the city nearby.
Oh.
To feel like, hey, want to go to a Billy Idol? And coming from a smaller town, Alberta, and now I'm in Romania, go and see a Billy Idol concert. It's that whole kind of new experiences thing that people talk about when joining the Air Force, and getting to fly air-to-air sorties with MiG-21s. And then ultimately we did get a flight in a MiG-21, which is
cool.
fairly cool to see that some of the stuff you talk about when you do your intel briefs about these aircraft, like their visibility looking rearward is almost nil. They won't see you behind them, but they have incredible acceleration. But when they go to turn, they can't turn nearly as well compared to fourth gen CF-18 can. So just to actually get hands-on with those guys, see what their aircraft are like, doing exercises. And then we did a NATO TAC eval for the base there, which is kind of evaluation of their readiness by a NATO community. So we took part in that, doing an exercise with them. So it was something I hadn't expected was even an option to see when I was joining the Air Force. And now here I am flying jets in Romania at night, trying to work with Romanian JTACs, like the ground controllers that would be embedded with an Army unit. They're on night vision goggles, using their laser to try and direct in my simulated weapons impacts over some Romanian village in the middle of the night, with some MiG-21s, operating over similar areas. It was a very cool experience.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So next, let's talk about Op Impact. You did 2 separate tours on Op Impact, flying against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Can you tell us what the Canadian fighters' mission was at that time?
Yeah, at the time there, we were doing CAS, close air support, and just air-to-ground support of the different coalition forces that were on the ground. So a lot of it was JTACs. They would be operating out of I want to say a KAC, but I'm not exactly sure the facility, but you'd have a variety of different countries with your joint tactical air controllers controlling the air-to-ground picture there. And that would be, they would have eyes on the ground through, different drones, Reapers, Predators, whatever it is, Global Hawks, whatever happens to be flying over the area, or other aircraft, ISR aircraft that had eyes on the ground, and occasionally embedded JTACs, but that was less so the case. And what you'd be doing is, it would be friendly forces taking fire from locations, and for the most part, you'd be tasked to go through a process called a 9-line, where they would give you all the information, 9 lines of information, including what, when, where, plus the coordinates, everything you need to be able to employ the weapon. And so a lot of missions were just very boring, which is not a bad thing. But a lot of times it would just be because you would always have aircraft over the area of operation. So you'd just go out, you'd be assigned this region, and so you'd use your targeting pod, which is, if those aren't, for those unfamiliar, it's the, basically either infrared or just a basic TV type camera that you can zoom in and out with, and see everything pretty much going on the ground with quite high fidelity. So you would just be tasked to search. They give you different locations, suspected something here, we have some activity here, and you would just be looking, seeing what's going on, reporting back. And that was a lot of the missions. There wasn't anything, maybe there's some fire being taken, but it's off in the distance. They don't have a precise coordinate, so you just go investigate. But when it did start to ramp up, then you'd kind of go on high alert, and you get the tingly that something's actually happening, because they start talking about, look here, what do you see? We've got fire coming from this, indirect fire or small arms fire towards friendly locations. So you would start to follow through, and then pretty quick that would develop into, okay, we're going to need weapons on target here. So then you would start to coordinate between you and your wingman, or you and your lead, depending on which role you're taking. Okay, how are we going to employ these weapons? What do we have? Because each aircraft, in the coalition has different capabilities, what they're looking for, trying to get weapons on target. And then it would be dependent, can you see them? So that, might be able to use a laser guided weapon. If you don't have good eyes on, maybe a drone can, you can drop a laser guided weapon that a drone could do the lasing in for the final impact. Or maybe they have really good coordinates. They were able to get precisely where this is coming from. In that case, you don't need eyes on. You could drop a GPS guided weapon. So the scenarios would kind of build quickly, and you're also you're over the middle of Iraq. There's tankers at various points, so you'd also have to try and manage this with fuel, because you don't want to have to have an emergency fuel situation over the desert there. You're always trying to think, okay, how long do I have? Can we, are we going to split up now? And maybe one aircraft's going to get fuel while the other one's trying to employ weapons. Or are we both, is there kind of a break now that we're both going to go back, get some fuel, because it hasn't really turned into a hot situation, so we can just get fuel, go back. And it ended up being quite long missions, because we were based out of Kuwait, and we'd have to fly to the north end of Iraq. So just transit time, and then you're on station with air-to-air refueling, and then the transit back. So they were quite long missions. And in the midst of that, as things started to get a little bit more kinetic on the ground, you would also feel the extra pressure in the air, because now there's real things coming off the jet that could have an impact on friendlies if you do this wrong. So
for sure,
it was definitely sort of you felt all that training that you'd previously done. You're well prepared for the situation, so it wasn't like you were anxious or fearful of anything going wrong. You had the typical nerves that you would have felt in any training scenario, because you've done it so many times before. It's now, it feels like all those previous times you've done a simulated drop of a weapon, or you've dropped that, high explosive, GPS guided weapon at a range. So it wasn't, there shouldn't be anything really new when you go to an operation. It was all very well practiced, and you've as well brief each mission thoroughly in a, you have to be dynamic in a scenario, but everyone knows their kind of roles in there. So it was definitely exciting in the terms of like a lot of adrenaline going on, but it didn't feel at any point like we were overwhelmed or behind on any of the points just because of all that background training we had.
Yeah, that speaks a lot about the training you guys receive.
Some of the other part is since you're on an actual operation, you're in a camp, Marines behind, machine guns guarding the whole, the base there, and you're pretty much staying on the base 24/7. And you're, wake up, and you have, you're either day or nights, so you have, half a day to kill, and then you're in a serious, mission where it may or may not be anything, may just be looking through the targeting pod, seeing nothing for 6 hours, or it may be something a little bit more exciting / not exciting, but a little bit more, heart thumping when you're actually releasing the weapons. But then you'd come back and you'd have time to kill. And I found it was interesting the way people found their off time, what they could do with it, because you didn't really have anywhere to go. They had good facilities there, but they had the standard games room, TV, lots of exercise facilities. But with everyone kind of mission focused, your downtime, people just found interesting ways to occupy their time. One of the amusing things we did, so we were all in sort of the big tents, mission planning tents, that not your typical camping tent, but got 20 people in there with computers. Well, one night we were bored and we thought the place needed sprucing up a bit, so there was a whole bunch of extra wood lying around, and we got a hold of some tools, and we decided we were going to build a deck for our big tent.
Nice.
So about 10 of us got together, over the span. This is probably 2 a.m. after a night sortie. We put together out the front of this mission planning tent. We built a whole patio, railing, found someone had scrapped somewhere like a rocking chair, a wooden rocking chair, got a hold of some cam netting, so put up a bit of a roof, cam netting, and then bridged the 2 tents we had there at the end of the row of these all these tents we had for mission planning.
That's awesome.
And the next morning, the rest of the camp wakes up, and there was some confused faces where there just appeared a whole patio with a camnet roof, rocking chair overnight. And for the first little bit, they couldn't figure out until we woke up and came in. And they're like, did you guys build a deck last night? Yeah, we might have built a deck.
That's great. So part of the nature of this mission is that you fighters are operating over hostile territory. How does that feel?
For us, it wasn't something you really think about too much. It's, again, goes back to the training, often simulated. But for this operation, we didn't have a lot of high threat, surface to air missiles that we weren't constantly in danger. We would do most of our mission tactics at medium level that would keep us out of, if someone decided they wanted to take a shot with AAA or something. You could see tracer fire down below you, and generally, for me, I never had anything that I could tell was directed in my general vicinity. But even then, with the altitude, unless it's some sort of radar guided type machine gun or AAA, you have sort of a lower probability of having any effect from the ground at that. So we weren't in a real hotly contested airspace, and that was just the way we operated. That we weren't going to go down low where we are more exposed, because for that mission, it's only going to make it's only going to make the scenario worse if we now have a downed pilot in the midst of all this.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. There's no sense taking unnecessary risk, right?
Yeah, exactly. And with the weapons we have on board, with the exception being the gun, which you have to point at the ground and get closer to it. But for all our laser guided, GPS guided bombs, you don't need to be down low, because that's what those weapons give you, is that accuracy from higher up.
Right.
Traditionally, you have to dive bomb to be able to get closer, steeper, to reduce that probability that the weapon's going to miss. But now with the technology in those, it kind of negates that and allows for you to just stay above the threat zone.
Right on. You led the last Canadian CF-18 mission in Iraq. Did you know it was the last one before launch?
Yeah, we did. We knew it was wrapping up, so it was a bit bittersweet. It's always nice to go home, bring everyone back, because it is time away from the family and everything, but bittersweet in the sense that you're wrapping up the operation, and you're kind of done with that portion, because it's what you train for. So being operationally focused does have something that you now know you're going to go back just to a training environment and don't have the same sort of impact on what's going on, because the conflict was starting to wind down a bit, but it wasn't completely over. So people are still operating there. But it was also interesting just having that experience. We're like, okay, well, we're wrapping this up today. We've got the same mission to do we've done previously, and let's not focus on it being the last one. Let's mission prep for everything we've been doing the entire time.
So just try to keep it standard as possible, and kind of, I've always heard that one of the most dangerous parts of a patrol is like the last half hour when the troops are getting back close to the base, and kind of the same idea. Like, you don't want to just relax because this is your last mission. Like, keep it as professional as you've been throughout the entire tour.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to let it slip your attention span, on that last little home stretch. Because we were still actively engaging threats even on that last mission. So it wasn't a time to let your guard down at that point. You just had to keep doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Okay, Brian, that's going to do it for part one of our chat today. It was super interesting learning about your training and some of your exercises and operational experiences. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about your time as an instructor and the LIFT program in Italy. So thank you for your time today, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to wrap up our chat with Brian about his flight training in the RCAF, as well as his operational career so far as a fighter pilot. Tune in to the next episode to hear about his time instructing on the Hornet, as well as a deep dive into the LIFT or lead-in fighter training program in Italy. Do you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard in this show? Would you or someone you know make a great guest, or do you have a great idea for a show? You can reach out to us at thepilotprojectpodcast@gmail.com or on all social media at @podpilotproject. And be sure to check out that social media for lots of great videos of our RCAF and mission aviation aircraft. As always, we'd like to thank you for tuning in and ask for your help with the big three. That's like and follow us on social media, share with your friends, and follow and rate us 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Keep the blue side up. See ya!
Engineer, shut down all 4.
Shutting down all 4 engines.